I'll never forget the sound of my own front door locking behind me with my belongings in garbage bags on the porch. My wife of 19 years stood in the doorway with another man's arm around her shoulder, telling me I had 24 hours to find somewhere else to live. What she didn't know was that 3 days earlier, I'd made a decision that would change everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning of the end. My name is Thomas Brennan. I'm 47 years old, and I've spent the last 2 decades building what I thought was an unbreakable life. I met my wife Rachel when we were both 26, working at the same marketing firm in Chicago. She was brilliant, ambitious, beautiful. I was captivated from the first day. We got married after 2 years of dating, bought a house in Evanston with a view of the lake, and built what looked from the outside like the perfect life. I worked my way up to senior creative director. Rachel eventually left corporate to start her own boutique consulting agency. We had money, status, friends, everything, except the one thing Rachel had always said she wanted: children. We tried for years. Fertility treatments, specialists, procedures that cost tens of thousands of dollars and left us both emotionally and physically exhausted. Nothing worked. After our fifth failed IVF attempt, Rachel stopped talking about it. She threw herself into her business, working 12-hour days, traveling constantly for clients. I thought she was coping, processing the grief in her own way. I was wrong. She was pulling away, and I was too focused on my own pain to notice until it was too late. The distance between us grew slowly, then all at once. Conversations became transactional. Dinners were silent. The warmth we'd once shared cooled into polite coexistence. Then came my diagnosis. 6 months ago, I started having headaches that wouldn't go away, blurred vision, fatigue that no amount of sleep could fix. My doctor ordered tests, then more tests, then finally a consultation with an oncologist. Brain tumor, stage 3, operable but aggressive. The survival rate was 60% with treatment, 60%. Those words sat in my chest like stones. I was 47 years old, and there was a 4 in 10 chance I'd be dead within 2 years. The doctor talked about surgery, radiation, chemotherapy. He talked about side effects, about recovery time, about the best case and worst case scenarios. I barely heard any of it. When I told Rachel, sitting in our kitchen on a Tuesday evening in March, I expected fear, sadness, maybe even denial. What I got was silence. She stared at her wine glass for a long moment, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "How bad is it?" she asked. I told her everything the doctor had said. She nodded slowly, asked a few clinical questions about treatment plans and timelines, then excused herself to take a work call. That was it. No tears, no embrace, no, "We'll get through this together." Just questions and a work call. I told myself she was in shock, that she'd process it later, that everyone grieves differently. But days passed, then weeks, and her reaction never came. She became more distant, more absent, staying late at the office, taking weekend trips for client meetings. I started treatment in April. The surgery went as well as it could. They removed most of the tumor, but not all of it. Radiation and chemotherapy followed. The side effects were brutal. I lost weight, lost my hair, lost the energy to do anything except sleep and try not to vomit. I took medical leave from work. Rachel barely acknowledged what I was going through. She'd leave for the office before I woke up and come home after I'd gone to bed. When we did cross paths, she'd ask perfunctory questions about my appointments, but never offered to come with me, never held my hand, never looked me in the eyes, and told me I'd be okay. I went to every treatment alone. My best friend Derek noticed before I did. He'd been helping me out, driving me to appointments when I was too weak to drive myself, bringing groceries, checking in daily. One afternoon in May, he asked me point blank, "Tom, when's the last time Rachel went with you to a doctor's appointment?" I had to think about it. "She's busy with work," I said automatically. She can't just drop everything." Derek looked at me with something between pity and anger. "Man, you're going through cancer treatment. If she can't drop everything for that, when can she?" I didn't have an answer. That conversation planted a seed of doubt that grew quickly once I started paying attention. I noticed things I'd been too sick and too trusting to see before. Rachel coming home at midnight smelling like cologne that wasn't mine. Her phone always face down on the table, password protected. Weekend client dinners that she never invited me to or told me about until she was walking out the door. Hushed phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. And through it all, this cold detachment. Like I was a roommate she tolerated rather than a husband she'd promised to love in sickness and in health. I told myself I was paranoid, that the treatment was making me suspicious, that she was just coping with stress in her own way. But deep down, I knew. I just didn't want to face it. The truth came out on a Saturday morning in late June. I was having a good day. My energy was up. The nausea had subsided, and I'd decided to surprise Rachel by cleaning the house and making dinner. She'd mentioned a client meeting downtown, said she'd be back by 3. I was vacuuming the bedroom when I noticed her laptop open on the desk, unlocked. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. But something pulled me toward it. Some instinct for self-preservation. Some need to confirm what I already knew. I opened her email, and there, in an inbox she'd clearly forgotten to close, was months of correspondence with someone named David Ashford. The emails were explicit. Detailed plans for hotel meetings, intimate messages, promises, and confessions that made my stomach turn. This wasn't a new thing. They'd been seeing each other since February, 1 month before my diagnosis. She'd been cheating on me before she even knew I was sick. But what gutted me was reading emails from after my diagnosis. Messages where she complained about being stuck taking care of someone dying, about how my illness was ruining everything, about how she couldn't wait to be free. There was an email from just 2 days ago where she told him, "I'm going to tell him this weekend, I can't do this anymore. I need to be with you." I sat at that desk for an hour, reading through months of betrayal, my hands shaking, my chest tight with something beyond anger. This woman I'd loved for 2 decades, who I'd built a life with, who I'd stood beside through every failure and disappointment, was planning to leave me while I fought for my life. She wasn't just having an affair. She was waiting for me to die so she could move on without the inconvenience of divorce. Or maybe she'd gotten tired of waiting. When Rachel came home that afternoon, I was sitting in the living room with printouts of the emails on the coffee table. She walked in laughing, phone to her ear, then stopped when she saw me. "I'll call you back," she said into the phone, her face going pale. "Who is David Ashford?" I asked, my voice steady despite the rage boiling inside me. She looked at the papers, then at me, and I watched her face cycle through shock, guilt, and finally defiance. "Tom, let me explain." "Explain what?" I interrupted. "Explain that you've been cheating on me since February. Explain that you called taking care of me, ruining everything. Explain that you complained to your boyfriend about being stuck with someone dying." She opened her mouth, closed it, then her jaw set. "You went through my private emails. You had no right." I actually laughed. "That's what you're going with. I violated your privacy." "Tom, you don't understand. This marriage has been dead for years. We both know it." "We know it," I repeated. "Rachel, I have cancer. I've been going through hell for months, and you haven't been there for a single day of it. I thought you were grieving, processing, coping. But no, you were just waiting for me to die so you could run off with your boyfriend without the mess of a divorce." She flinched at that, but recovered quickly. "That's not fair. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to spend my 40s taking care of a sick husband instead of living my life." Her words hit me like physical blows. "Taking care of me? Rachel, you haven't taken care of me at all. Derek has driven me to every appointment. Derek has made sure I eat. Derek has sat with me when I was too weak to stand. You've done nothing except complain to your affair partner about how inconvenient my cancer is." Tears filled her eyes, but they felt performative. "I can't do this anymore, Tom. I'm sorry. I can't watch you die. I can't put my life on hold for something I have no control over." "Then don't," I said quietly. "Leave. Go be with David. But don't pretend you're the victim here. Don't pretend you're doing this because you can't handle watching me die. You're doing this because you're selfish and you've been cheating for months and I caught you." She wiped her eyes, and I watched something shift in her expression. The guilt disappeared, replaced by cold calculation. "Fine. You want me to leave? I will. But this is my house too, Tom. I'm not going anywhere. If anyone's leaving, it's you." I stared at her. "You're kicking me out. I have cancer. Rachel, I'm in active treatment. And that's very sad, but it doesn't change the fact that this marriage is over and we can't both live here. You should go stay with Derek, or your sister, somewhere you can get the support you clearly need, support I'm not capable of giving." The cruelty of it took my breath away, but underneath the shock was clarity. This was who she really was. This was the woman I'd been married to all along, and I'd just been too in love to see it. "Fine," I said. I'll leave. But Rachel, when the divorce happens, you're going to regret this." She actually smiled. "Tom, I know you're upset, but let's be realistic. You're sick. You might not even survive the next year. Do you really want to spend whatever time you have left fighting me in court? Let's just end this amicably." That's when I knew. She wasn't just planning to leave me. She was planning to wait until I died and inherit everything. The house, my retirement accounts, my life insurance policy. She'd sit back, let cancer do the work, and walk away with $500,000 in assets. The realization settled over me like ice water. This wasn't just betrayal. This was calculated, strategic. She'd already decided my life was over and was positioning herself to benefit from my death. I stood up. "I'll be out by tomorrow," I said. "But Rachel, you should know, I'm not dying. The last scans showed the tumor shrinking. My prognosis is good. So you're going to have to divorce a living husband, not inherit from a dead one." The look on her face told me I'd guessed right. That was her plan. She recovered quickly, forced a smile. "Tom, that's wonderful news about your scans. I'm happy for you, but it doesn't change the fact that we're done." I packed that night. 19 years of marriage fit into 4 garbage bags and 2 suitcases. Derek came to help, and when he saw what was happening, he looked at Rachel with disgust. "You're throwing him out while he's in cancer treatment." Rachel crossed her arms. "This is between Tom and me. You should stay out of it." Derek turned to me. "You can stay with me as long as you need. Don't worry about anything." As I loaded my car, Rachel stood in the doorway with her phone to her ear, smiling at something the person on the other end said. I'd later learn it was David, already planning to move in. I spent the next 3 weeks at Derek's house, going through the worst of my treatment while trying to process the end of my marriage. Derek and his wife Maria treated me like family. They made sure I ate, drove me to appointments, sat with me during the bad days. They gave me the support Rachel should have given me, and I was grateful. But it didn't fill the hole her betrayal had left. During one particularly bad night, when I was too sick to sleep, I made a decision. I called my lawyer, Sharon Martinez, someone I'd worked with on estate planning years ago. I told her everything, the affair, the emails, Rachel's plan to wait for me to die. "Tom," Sharon said carefully, "are you sure you want to do this right now? You're going through so much." "I've never been more sure of anything," I told her. "I need to protect myself. I need to make sure that if something happens to me, Rachel doesn't get a cent." Sharon walked me through the options. I changed my will, removing Rachel as beneficiary and leaving everything to my sister Catherine and to a cancer research foundation. I updated my life insurance policy, removing Rachel there too. I documented everything about the affair, the emails, the dates, the evidence of her abandonment during my illness. Illinois isn't a no-fault divorce state. Infidelity and abandonment matter in asset division. Sharon assured me that with this evidence, Rachel would be lucky to get anything in the divorce. But I wanted to do more. I wanted her to understand exactly what she'd thrown away. My treatment progressed better than anyone expected. By August, the tumor had shrunk significantly. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. I was going to survive this, and every day I got stronger. I watched Rachel's social media and saw her life with David. Dinners at expensive restaurants, weekend trips, photos of them together where she looked happier than she'd ever looked with me. She'd moved him into our house within a week of kicking me out. They were playing house with my furniture, sleeping in my bed, living the life I was supposed to be living. And through it all, she ignored every message from my lawyer about starting divorce proceedings. She was stalling, waiting to see if I'd die after all. In September, 4 months after she kicked me out, I got the news I'd been hoping for. The latest scans showed no tumor growth. The treatment had worked. I was in remission, not cured. I'd need monitoring for years, but alive and recovering. I called Catherine first, and we both cried with relief. Then I called Sharon. "Time to move forward with everything," I told her. "File the divorce papers. Let's get this done." Sharon filed the next day. Rachel was served at her office, in front of her colleagues. I wasn't there, but Derek's wife, Maria, who worked in the same building, told me she went pale when she saw the papers, like she'd seen a ghost. She'd really thought I was going to die. She'd really believed she could just wait it out. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Rachel hired an aggressive attorney and fought for everything: the house, spousal support, half of my retirement accounts, claiming she was entitled to compensation for years of support during my career advancement. Her lawyer painted her as the devoted wife who'd stood by me through illness. conveniently omitting the affair, the abandonment, the cruelty. But Sharon was ready. She presented the emails, the timeline of the affair, testimony from Derek and my doctors about Rachel's complete absence during my treatment, evidence that she'd moved her boyfriend into our marital home within days of forcing me out. She presented my medical records showing the severity of my illness and Rachel's documented lack of support. The judge was not sympathetic to Rachel. In December, 7 months after Rachel kicked me out, we had the final hearing. It was the first time I'd seen her in months. She'd lost weight, looked tired, and avoided my eyes. David wasn't there. Sharon had subpoenaed him earlier, and his testimony about the timeline of their relationship had damaged Rachel's case significantly. When the judge asked if there were any final matters before ruling, Sharon stood, "Your Honor, my client has prepared a statement he'd like his former wife to hear before you issue your decision." The judge nodded. I stood, and for the first time since that day in our living room, I looked Rachel directly in the eyes. "Rachel, when you kicked me out in June, you told me you couldn't watch me die. You said you needed to live your life. What you really meant was that you were waiting for me to die so you could inherit everything without the mess of a divorce. You'd already calculated it. The house, the insurance, the accounts. You thought you had it all figured out." Her face went red, and her lawyer put a hand on her arm. "But I didn't die," I continued. "I'm here. I'm healthy. I'm in remission. And you're about to find out exactly what you threw away." I nodded to Sharon, who handed a document to the judge and to Rachel's attorney. Rachel took it, her hands shaking, and started reading. "What you're looking at," I said, "is my updated will and beneficiary designations. When you kicked me out, I removed you from everything. The house is in my name only. We never added you after my father left it to me, remember? You insisted we keep separate property and for tax purposes. That was your idea. The life insurance policy that would have paid out $500,000? You're no longer the beneficiary. My retirement accounts, not yours anymore. Everything goes to my sister Catherine and to cancer research." Rachel looked up from the papers, her face white. "You can't do this," she whispered. "I can," I said. And I did. The day after you kicked me out while I was fighting for my life, I changed everything. You thought you were going to wait for me to die and walk away rich. Instead, you're walking away with nothing." Her lawyer started to speak, but the judge held up a hand. "Mrs. Brennan, is it true that you engaged in an extramarital affair and forced your husband from the marital home while he was undergoing cancer treatment?" Rachel's lawyer whispered something urgent to her, but Rachel was staring at me with something close to horror. "Answer the question, Mrs. Brennan," the judge said firmly. "Yes," Rachel finally said, her voice barely audible. "But he violated my privacy by—" The judge cut her off. "You can spare me the justifications. I've reviewed the evidence, I've read the emails, I've heard the testimony. Mrs. Brennan, in my 20 years on the bench, I've seen many difficult divorce cases, but I've rarely seen such a clear-cut case of marital abandonment during a spouse's serious illness, combined with infidelity and calculated cruelty." He turned to me. "Mr. Brennan, I'm ruling that the house remains your sole property, as it was prior to the marriage. Given Mrs. Brennan's abandonment and infidelity, I'm awarding you sole ownership of all marital assets acquired during the marriage. Mrs. Brennan will receive no spousal support. The divorce is granted." The gavel came down. Rachel's lawyer immediately began speaking about appeals, but Rachel wasn't listening. She was staring at me with tears running down her face. Real tears this time. Tears of loss, of understanding what she'd thrown away. "Tom, please," she said, standing up. "Please, we can talk about this. I made mistakes, but we can work this out." I looked at her for a long moment. This woman I'd loved for 2 decades. This woman who'd left me at my lowest point. This woman who'd waited for me to die so she could cash in. "No, Rachel," I said quietly, "we can't. You made your choice when you threw me out in garbage bags while I was fighting cancer. You made your choice when you moved your boyfriend into our house. You made your choice when you wrote emails complaining about being stuck with someone dying. You showed me exactly who you are, and I finally believe you." I walked out of that courtroom with Sharon, leaving Rachel sobbing at the defense table. Derek was waiting outside, and when he saw my face, he grinned. "It's over?" he asked. "It's over," I said, and I felt lighter than I had in months. 3 days later, Rachel called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "What do you want, Rachel?" She was crying. "Tom, I'm begging you. I know I was wrong. I know I hurt you. But please, don't do this. I have nothing. David left when he realized I wasn't getting any money. My business is failing. I can't afford the apartment I'm renting. Please, can we talk about the house? About something? I took a breath. Rachel, you had everything. You had a husband who loved you, who would have done anything for you, who stood by you through infertility treatments and disappointment and everything we faced together. And when I needed you, you weren't there. You chose another man. You chose cruelty. You chose to wait for me to die so you could inherit. Those were your choices. I made a mistake, she sobbed. People make mistakes. Please, Tom, I'm losing everything. Good, I said, and I meant it. Ray, you should lose everything, because that's what you deserve. You threw away a marriage, a partner, a life, because you wanted something easier, something more exciting. You kicked me out during the worst time of my life, and now you're facing the consequences. Don't call me again, Rachel. Move on. That's what you said you wanted, right? To live your life? Go live it. I hung up. She tried calling twice more, but I blocked her number. Sharon told me later that Rachel tried to contest the divorce settlement, claiming emotional distress and duress, but it went nowhere. The evidence was too clear. She'd abandoned me, committed adultery, and forced me out during active cancer treatment. No judge was going to overturn that ruling. Life moved forward. I sold the house, too many bad memories, and bought a condo in Lincoln Park with a view of the city. I went back to work part-time, easing back into life. My health continued to improve. By my 1-year remission mark, the doctor said my prognosis was excellent. I'd beaten cancer, and I'd beaten the person who'd tried to profit from my death. Derek and Maria became closer than ever. They were the family I'd needed when my wife had failed me. Catherine flew in every month to check on me, to make sure I was okay, to remind me I was loved. And slowly, impossibly, I started to heal. Not just physically, but emotionally. The wound Rachel had left began to close. 1 year after the divorce, I ran into Rachel at a coffee shop downtown. It was awkward, painful, unavoidable. She looked older, harder. She was alone. "Tom," she said, her voice uncertain. "Hi." I nodded politely but didn't stop. She followed me. "Tom, please, can we talk? Just for a minute?" I turned to her. "What is there to talk about, Rachel?" She looked down. "I just want you to know that I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything to you now, but I need to say it. I was wrong. About everything. I threw away the best thing in my life because I was scared and selfish, and I've regretted it every day since." I looked at her, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even satisfaction. Just nothing. "I appreciate you saying that," I told her, "but it doesn't change anything." "I know," she said quietly. "I just needed you to hear it. I needed you to know that I understand what I lost." I studied her face for a moment. "Rachel, here's what I learned from all of this. People show you who they really are when things get hard. When I was diagnosed, you could have been my partner, my support, my strength. Instead, you started an affair and planned my funeral while I was still alive. That's who you are, and I don't hate you for it anymore. I just don't care." I saw the words hit her, saw her eyes fill with tears. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said. "I hope you build a life you're proud of. But it won't be with me. Not ever." I walked away, and this time, she didn't follow. Today, 2 years after my diagnosis, I'm healthy, happy, and free. The cancer is still in remission. I'm dating someone new, a woman named Claire who I met through a cancer support group, someone who understands what it means to fight for your life and come out the other side. We take it slow, build something real, something honest. I've learned that love isn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It's about who shows up when things fall apart. It's about who stays when staying is hard. Rachel taught me that lesson the hard way, but it was a lesson I needed to learn. My will still leaves everything to Catherine and cancer research. Even if I get married again, even if I build a new life, I'll never forget how close I came to dying and leaving everything to someone who'd wished for it. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that moment when the judge read my updated will in court, when Rachel's face went white as she realized what she'd lost. People have asked me if I felt satisfied, if I felt vindicated. The truth is, I felt sad. Sad that someone I'd loved could be so calculating, so cold. Sad that she'd thrown away 2 decades for an affair that lasted only as long as she thought money was coming. sad that she'd never understood what we had until it was gone. But I also felt free. Free from someone who saw me as an asset, not a partner. Free from a marriage built on appearance rather than substance. Free to build something real with someone who deserves it. The lesson I carry from all of this is simple. People will show you who they are. Believe them. When Rachel kicked me out with my belongings in garbage bags while I fought cancer, she showed me exactly who she was. I should have believed her sooner. When she chose her affair partner over her dying husband, she showed me her values. When she stalled divorce proceedings hoping I'd die, she showed me her character. I finally believed her, and in doing so, I saved myself. Not just financially, but emotionally, spiritually. I saved the life I'd fought so hard to keep, and that, more than any divorce settlement or court victory, is the real win. I'm alive, I'm free, and I'm building a life worth fighting for, with people who actually love me. That's all that matters.